Do you ever sense that you are not alone in your house, even when no one else is there? Have you experienced moments of unexplained peace, warnings that saved you from danger, or the feeling that someone unseen is watching over you and your family? What if I told you that the Psalms contain specific descriptions of angelic activity that most Christians read right past without ever noticing? What if the ancient Hebrew reveals exactly how God sends his angels to guard and protect his people, and gives us clear clues to recognize when their presence is active in our lives? Today, I want to take you deep into the Psalms to discover 5 clues that God may be sending angels to your house right now. And I believe that what you learn will fundamentally change how you understand the protection surrounding your life and the lives of everyone you love. If you have ever wondered whether angels are real, whether they actually interact with ordinary people like you and me, whether they care about our daily struggles and our late-night fears, I understand those questions deeply. For most of my 30 years teaching biblical Hebrew at the seminary in Nashville, I focused on the academic aspects of Scripture: grammar, syntax, historical context, textual analysis. I could parse Hebrew verbs in my sleep. I knew the history and etymology of nearly every word in the Psalms. But knowledge is not the same as understanding. And understanding only came when tragedy broke open everything I thought I knew. Something shifted permanently in my comprehension when I was translating Psalm 34 one evening while sitting beside Margaret's hospital bed during her final weeks on this earth. The Hebrew words I had taught to thousands of students suddenly came alive in a way that all my scholarship had completely missed for decades. And what I discovered about angelic protection in those dark hours has stayed with me every day since Margaret went home to be with the Lord. Before we dive into these 5 clues, let me establish something important from Scripture itself. The Psalms are not vague or uncertain about angels. They are remarkably specific and detailed. David did not speak about angels in abstract, theological, or merely symbolic terms. He spoke about them as a man who had personally experienced their protection firsthand, often in moments of desperate need when no human help was available. In Psalm 34, verse 7, David writes something truly extraordinary that deserves our careful attention. The Hebrew word he uses for angel is malak. It is spelled M-A-L-A-K. And it does not simply mean a winged celestial being floating on clouds the way Renaissance paintings taught us to imagine. In Hebrew, malak means messenger, one who carries out a mission, one who acts on behalf of someone greater, one sent with specific purpose and authority. When David says, "The malak of the Lord encamps around those who fear him," he is describing something far more intentional and personal than we often realize when we read it quickly in our English Bibles. This is not passive protection happening somewhere in the spiritual realm while we go about our daily lives unaware. This is an active deployment of divine messengers sent on specific assignments to guard specific people in specific situations. God dispatches his angels with your name on their orders. But here is what most English translations miss completely. And this is where my years of Hebrew study finally became more than just academic knowledge. The Hebrew word for encamps is chanah. It carries the rich imagery of a military force setting up camp, establishing a defensive perimeter, taking a protected position. This is siege warfare vocabulary, but in reverse. When David says the angel of the Lord encamps, he is describing protection so complete, so intentional, so militarily precise that nothing can breach the line. I remember the moment this understanding broke through to me. I was sitting in that dim hospital room at 2 in the morning, Margaret's breathing shallow and labored, the monitors beeping softly, and I was translating this verse word by word to keep myself from falling apart. When I reached chanah, I suddenly saw it. David was not describing a single angel standing guard at a distance. He was describing a military encampment surrounding him completely. Like a fortress of invisible warriors had established their position around him. That understanding changed how I read every psalm about protection from that night forward. And it provides the foundation for the 5 clues I am about to share with you. Let us begin with the first clue, and this one comes directly from the language David uses in Psalm 91. The first clue that God may be sending angels to your house is unexplained peace in dangerous or frightening circumstances. In Psalm 91, the famous protection psalm that has comforted believers for 3,000 years, we find some of the most detailed descriptions of angelic ministry in all of Scripture. Verse 11 says clearly, "For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. They will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." Let me break down the Hebrew here because the original language reveals depths that our English translations simply cannot capture. The Hebrew word translated as guard in this verse is shamar. It means to keep, to watch, to preserve, to maintain, to tend with vigilant care. It is the same word used in Genesis when God placed cherubim with flaming swords to guard the entrance to the Garden of Eden. Shamar implies constant vigilance, unblinking watchfulness, never sleeping attention. An angel assigned to Shamar, you does not take breaks or look away or get distracted. That angel watches without ceasing. Now here is what David is describing with this precise vocabulary. Angels who never take their eyes off you. Angels whose primary assignment is your preservation. Angels who lift you up before you even stumble, who catch you before your foot touches the stone that would have made you fall. And what is the natural effect of this kind of intense, unceasing, vigilant protection? Peace. Deep, unexplainable, almost irrational peace, even when circumstances clearly say you should be terrified, anxious, or falling apart. I experienced this phenomenon myself during the final days of Margaret's illness. My wife of 32 years was dying. The diagnosis was terminal. The timeline the doctors gave us was short. Everything in my mind wanted to panic. Every rational thought said I should be terrified and despairing. But there was this overwhelming calm that settled over me, especially in that hospital room late at night, when the visitors had gone home and the halls grew quiet. I could not manufacture that peace through positive thinking or theological knowledge. I did not earn it through being good enough or faithful enough. It simply was there, present, like a warm blanket had been draped over my entire being. Like the very air in that room had been changed by someone I could not see. Looking back now, with fresh eyes from the Hebrew I had been translating night after night, I wonder, with growing conviction, if I was experiencing exactly what David described. The shamar of the angels, the watching, guarding, preserving, lifting presence that brings supernatural peace, even when walking through the darkest valley imaginable. If you have ever experienced peace that defied your circumstances, peace that made absolutely no logical sense given what you were facing, peace that seemed to come from outside yourself rather than from your own strength, consider this the first powerful clue that angelic protection is active and present in your life right now. But here is where the scripture becomes even more specific and personal. Because the second clue involves something David describes with remarkable precision in his writings. The second clue that angels may be guarding your home is being warned about danger before it actually occurs. In Psalm 91 verse 5 and following, David speaks about the terror of night, the arrow that flies by day, the pestilence that stalks in darkness, and the destruction that devastates at noon. These are not merely metaphors or poetic imagery for David. These were the real, physical, deadly dangers that surrounded him throughout his eventful and often perilous life as a fugitive, a warrior, and a king with many enemies. But notice carefully what David actually says here. He does not claim that he was never in danger. He does not say that bad things never came near him. What he says is that he was not afraid of these dangers even when they were very real and very close. Why? Because he knew with settled confidence that protection was active and working even when he could not see it operating. The Hebrew word for terror in this passage is pashad. It means sudden dread, the fear that grips your heart without warning, the panic that comes upon you before you can even think rationally about the situation. David is declaring that even when circumstances absolutely warranted pashad, even when any reasonable person would experience that gripping dread, he did not. Something was shielding him not just from the danger itself, but from the fear of danger. This connects to something I have noticed consistently in the testimonies of believers throughout the centuries of church history and in my own pastoral experience. Many sincere Christians report receiving warnings about danger before it actually happens. A sudden urging not to take a certain route they had planned. An unexplainable feeling that something is wrong in a particular place or situation. A dream that reveals what is coming before it arrives. A voice in their spirit that says, "Wait or go now," or "Do not do this." When Margaret was first diagnosed with the cancer that would eventually take her life, I had a dream 3 nights before we received any medical news. In the dream, I was standing at the entrance to a dark valley. Mountains rose on either side. The path led down into shadow. And a voice, not audible, but somehow more real than audible, said clearly to me, "Walk through, not around, through." At the time, I did not understand what that dream meant. I woke puzzled and wrote it in my journal. But when the doctor sat us down and gave us the devastating diagnosis 3 days later, I suddenly remembered that dream with perfect clarity. The valley was before me. The shadow was real. But the message had been clear. Walk through, not around. Through. That dream did not remove the difficulty we were about to face. It did not heal Margaret or change the outcome, but it prepared me for what was coming. It was as if someone had gone ahead of us to tell me the path I would walk, and to assure me that walking through was possible. Are such warnings and dreams from angels? Scripture does not explicitly and definitively say in every case. But given what the Psalms teach about angelic guardianship, given the Hebrew understanding of malak as messengers sent on specific missions with specific messages to deliver, it seems far more than merely possible. It seems likely. It seems consistent with how God has worked throughout Scripture. If you have ever received a warning, a dream, an unexplainable urging that protected you from harm you could not have known was coming, consider this the second clue of angelic activity operating in your life and the lives of those you love. Now, the third clue requires us to go even deeper into the Hebrew language, because there is a phrase in Psalm 34 that most English translations simply cannot fully capture with the words available to them. The third clue that God may be sending angels to your house is the sense of being surrounded by invisible protection. Psalm 34 verse 7 in the original Hebrew does not simply say that the angel encamps. It says the angel encamps around. The Hebrew phrase here is sabiyb, which means on every side, surrounding completely, encircling with no gaps, encompassing entirely. I want you to picture what David is actually describing with this precise military vocabulary. He is not talking about an angel standing guard at your front door while the back remains vulnerable. He is not describing partial protection or limited coverage. He is saying that an angel surrounds your entire dwelling, protection on every side simultaneously. No gap in the perimeter, no vulnerability in the line, no direction left unguarded or exposed to the enemy. This is why David could write with such confidence in Psalm 4, verse 8, "In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety." The Hebrew word for safety in this verse is bitach. It means security, confidence, a protected place where fear cannot reach, where worry cannot penetrate. When you understand the full weight of the Hebrew, David is not merely expressing a feeling or wishful thinking. He is describing an objective reality. He could lie down and sleep in complete peace because divine protection was surrounding him on every side. The sabiyb presence of the angelic guard meant that no threat could approach from any direction without first encountering God's messenger. I have talked with many believers over my years of teaching and ministry who describe exactly this experience. A sense of being in a protected space. A feeling that their home is somehow different from other places, somehow set apart, somehow watched over by something good. Some describe it as walking into their house after being out in the difficult world and feeling like they have crossed a threshold into safety. Others talk about waking at night and sensing that something benevolent is present in the room with them. Not frightening, not eerie or ghostly, simply present. Like the very atmosphere of their home has been changed by the presence of someone unseen but real. Could this be the sabiyb presence of angelic guardians? Based on what Psalm 34 reveals in the original Hebrew, based on the precise military vocabulary David chose to use, I have come to believe it could be exactly that. Your home may be encircled by protection you cannot see, but can sometimes sense. If you have experienced this kind of surrounding presence in your home, if you have felt that your dwelling place is somehow protected in ways you cannot explain, consider it the third clue that God has sent His angels to establish their camp around you and everyone who lives with you. Before I share the fourth clue, I want to tell you about something significant that happened when I was translating these Psalms in the weeks after Margaret's death. Because the fourth clue is one that brought me tremendous comfort during the darkest and most lonely season of my entire life. The fourth clue that angels may be active in your life is experiencing help that appears exactly when needed and disappears just as suddenly and mysteriously. Hebrews chapter 13 verse 2 tells us clearly not to neglect hospitality to strangers, because some have entertained angels without knowing it. This remarkable statement from the New Testament writer suggests plainly that angels sometimes appear in human form. They help, they deliver messages, they provide what is needed, and then they are gone, often without explanation. But here is what I discovered in the Hebrew of the Psalms that adds depth to this New Testament teaching. The word malak, meaning messenger or angel, shares the same three-letter root as the word malaka, which means work, mission, or purposeful task. This linguistic connection is not accidental in Hebrew. It reveals something profound about the nature of angelic beings. Angels are not wandering spirits drifting through the universe with nothing particular to do. They are not celestial beings floating on clouds playing harps for eternity. They are sent on specific assignments by the God who commands them. They appear when needed, accomplish their divinely appointed mission, and return to the presence of the one who sent them. They are workers. They are messengers with purpose. This understanding explains something that happens far more often than we usually recognize or acknowledge. A stranger appears at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right help you desperately needed. A phone call comes from someone who had no natural way of knowing you needed to hear their voice at that precise time. A door opens that should have been closed, or a door closes that protects you from something on the other side. Help arrives when all human resources have been exhausted. And when you turn to thank whoever helped you, They are simply gone, vanished. No trace. I experienced this phenomenon in a way I will never forget on the night Margaret finally died. It was nearly 3 in the morning. I had sent our children home to try to rest because we did not know how much longer the end would take. The hospital floor was quiet. The monitors in Margaret's room showed her vital signs slowly fading. And I was completely alone with my grief, holding her hand, knowing the end was very near. Then a nurse I had never seen before came quietly into the room. I looked up, expecting her to check the monitors or adjust the IV or perform some medical task, but she did not do any of those things. She simply sat down in the chair beside me, looked at Margaret's peaceful face, and then looked at me. And she said, in a voice that was somehow both ordinary and extraordinary, "She knows you are here. She has always known. And she is not afraid. She is ready." Those words carried me through the next hours. They gave me permission to let go. They assured me that Margaret was at peace even as her body was releasing her spirit. When Margaret took her final breath about 90 minutes later, I looked up to thank that nurse for her kindness. But she was not in the room. I walked to the door and looked down the hallway. Empty. I asked at the nurse's station about a woman matching her description. No one on the night shift matched what I described. No one could explain who had been in that room with me. Was she an angel? I cannot prove it with academic certainty. But I can tell you that her words were exactly what my shattered heart needed, delivered at exactly the moment I needed them most. And she appeared and disappeared in a way that exactly matches how Scripture describes angelic visitations. If you have ever experienced help that came from nowhere and vanished just as mysteriously, if a stranger has appeared at your moment of greatest need and then simply was not there when you looked for them again, consider this the 4th clue that angels are actively working in your life according to their divine assignments. And now we arrive at the 5th clue. This one is perhaps the most profound and personally meaningful of all the clues, and it comes from a Hebrew word that changed everything about how I understand God's presence during difficult times. The 5th clue, that God may be sending angels to guard your home, is a deepening awareness of His presence that you cannot manufacture through your own efforts. In Psalm 91, verse 1, we read these familiar words about dwelling in the shelter of the Most High and abiding in the shadow of the Almighty. Most people read past this quickly, but the Hebrew word for shadow here deserves our careful attention. The word is tzel. It means shade, covering, protection from the burning elements, relief from the scorching heat. But here is what I discovered during those grief-filled weeks, when I was forcing myself to keep translating Hebrew just to survive the loss of Margaret. The shadow requires a source of light. You cannot have a shadow without something substantial standing between you and the light. And that something, in David's beautiful imagery, is God Himself. Think about what this means. The shadow of the Almighty suggests that God Himself is standing between you and whatever threatens to burn you. His presence creates the shade. His nearness provides the covering. You dwell not just under His protection, but in the shadow He casts by His very being. And here is where angels enter this picture. The angels are messengers and ministers of this divine presence. They carry the atmosphere of God's throne room wherever they go. When they surround us in their sabiyb encampment, they bring the tzel, the shadow of the Almighty, with them. They extend the shade of His presence to wherever they are stationed. This explains something that many believers experience but struggle to put into words. There are seasons when God feels distant and far away. Prayer feels dry and mechanical. Scripture seems like just marks on paper rather than living words. You go through the motions of faith but feel nothing. The connection seems broken or blocked. And then suddenly, without any external change you can point to, without anything being different in your circumstances, God feels close again. His presence becomes tangible and real. Peace returns like a flood. Prayer becomes conversation again. Scripture comes alive with fresh meaning. What changed? Sometimes nothing visible has changed at all. But sometimes, I have come to believe, the angelic protection surrounding us has intensified. The T-cell has deepened. The shadow of the Almighty has drawn closer through the ministry of His messengers, who have drawn nearer to us. Jacob experienced exactly this phenomenon at Bethel. He was running for his life, alone in the wilderness, using a stone for a pillow. He dreamed of angels ascending and descending on a ladder connecting heaven and earth. And when he woke from that dream, he declared with wonder, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." Did you catch what happened? Jacob had been in the presence of God and had not known it. The angels in his dream made him aware of a presence that had been there all along, surrounding him, protecting him, watching over him while he slept. If you have ever experienced sudden, unexplainable awareness of God's presence after a dry and difficult season, especially if that awareness came without any action on your part, consider this the fifth clue that angelic ministry is actively happening in your life. Now, I know some of you watching this may be wondering, does this really apply to me? I am just an ordinary person living an ordinary life in an ordinary house. Why would the God of the universe send angels to watch over someone like me? And that question reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of how God works and who His angels serve. Psalm 34 verse 7 does not say, "The angel of the Lord encamps around the spiritual elite, or the famous preachers, or the missionary heroes, or the theological giants." It says, with beautiful simplicity, that the angel encamps around those who fear Him, those who revere Him, those who trust Him with their lives. That is you, friend. That is me. That is every humble believer who has placed their faith in the God of David, regardless of how ordinary we feel. The Hebrew word for fear in this verse is yar, spelled Y-A-R-E. It does not mean terror or being afraid. It means reverential awe. It means recognizing who God truly is and responding to His greatness with trust and surrender. It means saying, "You are God, and I am not, and I will live accordingly." If you fear the Lord in this way, if you trust Him and revere Him and have given your life to Him, angelic protection is explicitly promised to you. Not because you earned it through being good enough, not because you are more spiritual than others, simply because you belong to Him, and He guards what is His. When Margaret was dying, one of the truths that sustained me was knowing that she was surrounded by supernatural protection, even as her physical body was failing her. The malak of the Lord was encamped around her hospital bed. The shamar, the guarding presence, was actively watching. The sabiyb, the surrounding protection, had not failed, and would not fail. And when she finally passed from this world to the next, I believe with my whole heart that the very angels who had been guarding her in life simply became her escort into glory. She was never unprotected for a single moment, not during her illness, not at the moment of death, not on her journey home. Let me close with this invitation and this application. This week, I want you to pay attention to the clues we have discussed. Notice the moments of unexplainable peace that come when you should be anxious. Pay attention to warnings that arrive from nowhere and protect you from harm. Be aware of the sense of being surrounded by something good and protective. Watch for help that appears exactly when needed from sources you cannot explain. And be open to sudden, unexpected awareness of God's presence. The angels are there. They have been there all along. Sometimes we simply need fresh eyes, trained by the Hebrew of the Psalms, to recognize their ministry. If you are walking through your own valley of shadow right now, know this truth deeply. David walked through valleys too. He wept. He feared. He felt alone and abandoned. But he also discovered that the malak of the Lord was closer than he knew. The angels encamped around him in the darkness as faithfully as they did in the light. The shadow that surrounded him was not the shadow of death, but the shadow of the Almighty. You are not unprotected tonight. Your house is not unguarded. Your family is not exposed to every threat that exists. The God who sent angels to guard David 3,000 years ago has sent them to guard you today. The same Hebrew word applies. The same promise stands. I would love to hear from you after watching this message. Have you experienced any of these 5 clues in your own life? A moment of unexplainable peace during crisis. A warning that protected you from danger. The sense of being surrounded by something good. Help that appeared from nowhere at the perfect time. A sudden deepening of your awareness of God's presence. Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might encourage someone else who desperately needs to hear it today. And if you want to go deeper into the Psalms with me, to discover the treasures hidden in the Hebrew that most translations miss, to find ancient words for your modern struggles, subscribe to this channel. We are walking through these timeless songs together, finding wisdom that has sustained believers for 3,000 years. Let me close with David's own words from Psalm 34, first in Hebrew and then translated. He writes, Chanah malak Yahweh sabiyb laireav vayechaletsem. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. That promise was true for David 3,000 years ago in the wilderness of Judea. It was true for me in that Nashville hospital room, and it is true for you right now, wherever you are, whatever you are facing, in your house with your family. The angels are encamped around you. You are surrounded by more protection than your eyes can see. May you sleep in profound peace tonight, knowing you are guarded by unseen warriors. May you walk in confidence tomorrow, knowing you are never alone. And may the shadow of the Almighty cover you and everyone you love. Until we meet again, friend, you are far more protected than you know.